Hello, I'm Angelle Scarborough. I'm the rector of All Saints Episcopal Church in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Now today I'm in my kitchen and I'm preparing to make some Candlemas tea lights. Candlemas is actually the feast of the presentation of our Lord Jesus Christ in the temple, and it takes place on February 2nd. Now the rest of the world might call that Groundhog Day, and that's kind of a big deal up here in Pennsylvania. But it's also known as Candlemas, and it is a traditional day for blessing the candles in the church and also blessing the ministry of acolytes. It's kind of a special day for me because it's the anniversary of my ordination. So I like to celebrate Candlemas on Candlemas. So we will be celebrating at All Saints at 6 o'clock on February 2nd with a Candlemas Eucharist. And we're inviting anyone in the area who would like to have their candles blessed to bring them to the church. Bring a special candle, bring something, or pick up one of our Candlemas tea lights that we'll be blessing at the service. Now, a Candlemas tea light, you can also make a larger candle out of an orange, but I'm actually using some clementines, also known as mandarin oranges, or some places call them satsumas. That was a new one on me this year. So I'm going to show you how to make some Candlemas candles. They smell absolutely wonderful. And if you'd like to pick one up, I will have them at church on Sunday, and we will be back in person this Sunday. Thank goodness. The COVID numbers are getting better. So come by and pick up a candle. Come by on Candlemas. We will be blessing these, and you can pick one up that night too and celebrate the lengthening of the days and the feast of the presentation. So here's what you need to make Candlemas tea lights. Of course, you can, as I said, you can make candles from oranges, but I'm using these little cute mandarin oranges, which I kind of like to eat. I mean, they're nice and sweet and tasty. And I bought a whole bag of them over at Costco. You can buy them usually at this time anywhere in your produce section of your grocery store. And what you do is hollow out, cut them in half, and hollow out the peel. Then what you do is stud them with cloves. You will need whole cloves. This is a nice touch. You don't absolutely need them. You can make a tea light just out of the shell itself, but it's kind of nice to stud them with cloves. Now I did this one a couple days ago. You can see it's getting a little dry. But we studded it with cloves and put a little tabbed wick. Okay, you can get these at your local craft store. You can get them online. They're a tabbed wick for a votive light, or for this time it was a tea light. They're about 1 inch long. So let's see if I can get this on the camera. Yeah, they stick up just a little bit so that you'll be able to light them. It has a wonderful orange smell. Adding the cloves gives it a little bit of a spicy smell. Hollowing out the fruit is actually quite easy. These mandarin oranges, you peel them from the side by using a spoon, and then spoon the insides into a bowl. You can use that for fruit salad or just eat them raw. Put them in your refrigerator after you've pulled them out of their shells. So getting this out of its peel is not too hard. You just take a spoon and kind of press it down and pull away from the edge. It's a little like eating a grapefruit. And you can pull the fruit flesh away from the skin. This one's going to give me trouble, right? And there you go. I find these are a little easier, especially if your hands are smaller, which mine are. You can kind of reach in and pull the rest out. Now, when you do this, you may end up with a little bit of stuff in the middle. You can just pull that stuff, fibrous stuff, out and get it as flat as you possibly can. That way you won't have a lot of wobble with your tea light. Your next step, once you have your shells, is to stud them with cloves. And these are whole cloves. I got mine at Penzeys Spices, one of my favorite spice places. They're very reasonably priced from Penzeys. Give Bill Penzey a shout out. And you just press the clove right through the skin. Now it's very easy to do with these mandarin oranges because they have a very thin skin. Might be a little tougher if you're trying to do a full-blown orange. I just kind of have fingers inside and press this through. And it comes out like this. Now, if you have a larger orange, some of the instructions you'll find online have you cutting the edge kind of in a little jagged pattern. That's just not really possible with a tiny orange like this. But with a larger orange, it's reminiscent of the crown of a king, you know, the tradition of the three kings who visit the Christ child. It's optional. I'm going to keep this one plain and just put the cloves in it, and it gives it a wonderful smell. Also, just a note on the wax. I have decided to go with white beeswax pellets. This is 100% organic. I bought this online. And part of the reason for going with a more natural organic wax like beeswax or soy wax is because it doesn't have a chemical smell. You get a little chemical smell when you use paraffin. So I'm choosing white beeswax, but you can really choose pretty much anything. This is also a great way to upcycle candles. If you have some candles that were kind of sitting around and they're too small to do anything with anymore, you can melt those down and use that wax. In the church, sometimes we have a lot of 51% beeswax candles that get partially burned. This is a great way to upcycle them. I don't have any more candles to upcycle because I moved and I had to get rid of a lot of things when I moved. So I had to buy some white beeswax. And so that's going to be the contents of the candle that will give a nice smell along with the orange and the cloves. One other note you want to pay attention to is one side of your orange or your mandarin orange will likely have one of these little remnants of the stem, the little green thing, little green button there. It can make it hard for the candle to sit straight. You can see it kind of wobbles around, and wobbling things on fire are not a good combination. So you may want to cut this off and just flatten that out a little bit. As you get some of these orange shells, orange peels cleaned out, you may notice that there might be some with a little tiny hole in them. That's not a big deal if it's small, but like this one, that's a pretty big gaping hole, and I'm not going to use this one because I don't want hot wax leaking out the bottom. That would not be a good idea. So I'm just going to toss this one out, but if it's a really small hole, it should be covered up by the wick tab. Okay, so I've got all my little mandarin oranges cut in half, the inside scooped out, the edges studded with cloves, and we've put the pre-tabbed wicks in. Now, some of these I had to kind of scrape with my fingernail on the inside here because maybe that wick isn't quite sitting straight. You want it to sit as straight as possible when you put the wax in. Now what I'm going to do is melt the wax over a double boiler. You always want to do it over a double boiler so that it doesn't catch fire. And then we're going to spoon the wax into the shells. If you try to pour it, it's going to go everywhere. You just want to get like a tablespoon out and spoon the wax in carefully, and then that way you won't make too much of a mess. Okay. All right, so I'm about to put the wax into my double boiler. It is for candle making, but if you have something that you can use, if you have a regular double boiler, that's great. If you want to, if you want to reuse it, I would recommend getting something that is going to just be for candle making, because cleaning wax out, as you can see from the edge of this, it's really hard to do once you've used it for candles. So these aren't very expensive. You can get them in any craft store. And then my beeswax pellets, and I opened them up, and they look like this, and they're kind of sticky, which is fine. I'm just going to put a bunch of them into the container here, and then my double boiler is really just a pot where this will fit into. So I don't know if you can see, but we're starting to get some melting on the wax. And the ideal pouring temperature for beeswax is somewhere between 155 and 160 degrees. If you have a thermometer, that's great. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. You're making tea lights. It's not quite as touchy as pouring a pillar candle, but you can be mindful of that temperature if you want to. I'm not going to worry too much about it, but you'll notice this this is suspended and it is kind of floating in the water. You don't want the pitcher on direct flame, so there has to be just enough water that it's not getting direct heat. Well, our beeswax is definitely melting down. It's just taken a while. Some of this, these pellets came out in a big clump. So just taking the time and letting it melt. Don't walk away from it. You want to hang around and not walk away too far. You don't want it to get too hot. You do have to keep the water boiling. Okay, this is just at a very, very low boil. I've got it on a medium low just to maintain the boiling point and allow the wax to melt. Okay, it's time for the pour. But it's not really a pour, it's more of a spooning. I have my tablespoon here and my melted wax here, and I'm just going to carefully spoon the wax into each of these shells. Now I already have one that sprung a big old leak, and the wax just kind of went all over the granite countertop. That'll be fun. You want to protect your surfaces. I have granite here. It's very easy to clean up, but other surfaces might not be. So you'll probably want to spread some newspaper or something that makes it easier to clean up. I'm just going to take my tablespoon and pour the wax. I'm just doing about a tablespoon at a time. Some of the shells are going to be a little larger, some a little smaller. If a tablespoon doesn't quite fill it up, wait just a couple of minutes, make sure it doesn't spring a big leak, and pour a little more wax in. Usually when you're making candles, the wax will shrink, by the way. That's a given. Wax is going to shrink away. Usually shrinks away from both the wick and from the sides. So you may have to do a second little miniature pour to put a little bit more in there. You may have to pop some air bubbles around the wicks. That's not uncommon. Whoops. The guy went sideways on me. So I'll just pick up this wick, hopefully not dump all the wax. Let's see if I can fish that out without totally burning my fingers. Okay, so I have done a second pour on all of these little candles. The good news is the ones that sprung leaks, I just waited for the wax to harden and it plugged the hole. So when you burn these, you definitely want to put them on some kind of a dish so that if they do spring a leak, you won't get it all over your table. So that's it. That's what it takes to make orange clove candles for Candlemas. I'm going to take these to the church and make sure that they're available, and we will bless them on Candlemas, February 2nd. If you want to make ones out of a larger orange, full-size orange, I would really recommend you make sure you do a couple of pours and get pre-tabbed candle wicks that are votive sized. You'll need something a little bit taller than a tea light for that kind of candle, but you might have some fun making these yourself. And we wish you a very blessed Feast of the Presentation. Happy Candlemas.